Welcome everyone, we're live. Welcome to the show. CT joined by the one, the only, John SCHMEELK. John, how are we feeling?
What's going on, CT? How are you, man?
Yeah, doing really well as the buzz in this off-season gets louder and louder as we get closer to the draft, free agency. You know, it's a fun time of year, but this time it feels different, I must admit. We haven't had a chance to hear your thoughts. Yeah, exactly. Haven't had a chance to hear your thoughts on, after the season ended, and now we've had a bit of time to sit and stew on what happened. What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, look, I think the team's in good shape. I think they're in a good spot, to be honest with you. I think they're well positioned overall in terms of assets and being a destination location where stars want to go. Other teams have more assets, like New Orleans and Oklahoma City and Utah. Okay, great, but no big time players going to want to go to those places. So, or at least I think it's unlikely. Maybe New Orleans is an exception to the rule there. But no one's clamoring to go to Oklahoma City or Utah. So I think the Knicks are well positioned to strike here and continue to improve their team. But I don't think, and I think fans will probably get frustrated by me during this podcast, there are no easy answers here, man. I mean, there is no, in my opinion, obvious, clear path and set of moves that the Knicks can make that, all right, now you're a contender. So maybe the best move is to run it back. Maybe the best move is to just not make the wrong move because, once you commit to one of these big guys, it's hard to get out of that commitment and kind of move on and pivot somewhere else. So you got to make sure your next big move is the right one because, look, the Knicks did the hardest part of their building process this offseason, or last offseason, CT. Look, we talked about when they were thinking about trading for Donovan Mitchell. Well, you have to have enough to make the second move to get the second star, right? Well, here's the thing. The Knicks found the star, and all they had to do was sign him in for agency, and his name is Jalen Brunson. So now you're sitting there. You have your one star. You know exactly what his strengths and weaknesses are. You have all these assets to find the perfect complement to him, and that's what you're going to have to do. So that tough part is over. Finding one of your star players, quote unquote, on the cheap, just as a free agent. He might have the best contract in all of basketball. Now you got to find the next guy. And it's a lot easier to go from 40 to 50 wins than it is to go from 50 to 60 wins. And that's kind of where the Knicks are, but they're well positioned to do it. It's just a matter of finding the right guy, and I'm sure we're going to cycle through a bunch of those guys over the course of the next, hour or so. But they all have flaws, and there's positives and minuses to all of them. What do you have to give up? It's not going to be easy.
Definitely. Roster construction is the big thing. That's why these executives get paid the big bucks, We had teams, and I say this, John, 29 teams are unsuccessful every year. Teams with Kevin Durant, teams with Joel Embiid. If this thing was easy, you'd see teams win more often than the New York Knicks. It's been too long, 50 years. And I appreciate everyone coming through. We'll talk about the draft. We'll answer any questions you throw out. But of course, CT with John SCHMEELK here to talk about the off-season and what we can expect or try and put our thinking caps on and predict what's going to happen. But I agree with you. We're in such a unique situation. I would call it maybe the honeymoon period, John, because before you make that all-in move, it really is the honeymoon period. Like everyone's kind of feeling good about the future but what's going to come next? And the cap situation is going to be fascinating. The New York Knicks don't have any draft salary incoming yet. But the Jalen Brunson contract you mentioned is just unbelievable. It's like the best contract in the NBA, I feel, as it's descending. And we look at these guys like LaVine, Cat, Embiid, who we'll talk about tonight. Those guys, they're in the 40s plus. And then there's a lot of talk about Julius Randle's contract, RJ Barrett's contract, which are pretty good numbers if you have to think about it.
Julius Randle's got a great contract. I mean, Bobby Marks has said it multiple times. I mean, he's got a really good contract. I mean, he's making under $30 million a year. And for all his flaws, and look, we can talk about those if you want. I'm kind of sick of the Julius Randle stuff, to be honest with you. I can't take it anymore. But that's a good number, and he's at that number. He's going to have value. And look, I think big picture, CT. Here's the thing: when we talk about all these guys, when the Knicks cash in all these assets, whatever that looks like, right? And maybe it's two trades, right? Where you do two different things, you add two guys. However, they end up wanting to do this. when all is said and done, they have to add at least one player that's as good as or better than Jalen Brunson. I think Brunson can be a 1B, but I think then you need a 1A, which is just as good
Absolutely.
as him
Yep.
or better. Look, I love Jalen Brunson. I love the signing. He's great. But he has two issues. One is his defense, right? We know he's not a great defender, so it's hard to put other poor backcourt defenders with him. That's one. Number two, and this is why I say you have to get someone that's as good or better than him. When you put a double team on him or size and athleticism on him, it's going to make things difficult for him because he's just not big and he's not super athletic. We saw when the Cavs put Isaac Okoro on him, right? He gave Jalen Brunson legit issues in that series. The problem is that Okoro was so bad offensively they couldn't leave him on the floor for a long time, right? But if he's in the game for long stretches, Brunson struggles in that series. So you need to have somebody that I think has that athleticism and size combination to overcome some of those things. They need somebody that's not a huge minus defensively, at the 2 or the 3. So I think those are the two ways you have to kind of build around Brunson here as your star. And I think that's the only guy you build around. Everyone else is expendable. Everyone else can be traded. And you build around Brunson, and then you try to make the rest work around that.
Yeah, 100%. Another point I'll add with Brunson is you don't want him playing 40 minutes a night, too. That's another reason for Tibbs to get help. And that's something the biggest thing fans took for granted with Julius Randle, right? If we have a bigger star who plays 65 games with load management or whatever, you're not winning 47, 50 games like we did possibly with Julius Randle, who is a regular season kind of guy, hasn't proven it yet to be in the playoffs. How did you see Randle's playoffs, as the quote-unquote second best player next to Brunson?
Look, I'll try to keep it brief on Randle, but I do think it's more nuanced than what some Knicks fans have made it out to be. One, if you trade him, it is not addition by subtraction. That's, and I don't want to offend people, that's stupidity. I mean, it just is. The Knicks, if you just take Randle off the team this year, they might not get out of the play-in tournament. They might not be in the play-in tournament. I mean, I'm not even trying to be
He's a great regular season player.
He's a great regular season player. He was 13th All NBA. Everyone loves Pascal Siakam. He had a better year than Pascal Siakam, right? I mean, he was that good in the regular season. So you can't just get rid of him. You have to replace him with somebody that's going to help. Jalen Brunson cannot do it all himself. He needs someone to do it with him. Otherwise, you will wear him down and you will destroy him by the end of the year. He will not be healthy in the playoffs. So that's one. Number two, the postseason. All right? It was bad. I mean, there isn't any two ways about it. It was bad. How much of it was the ankle? I have no idea.
That's the issue.
Everyone likes to make excuses for every other player on the roster, but for some reason, no one wants to bring up the fact that Julius Randle in the two matchups, who was the first team all-defense power forward this year? Oh, it was Bam Adebayo. Who was the second team all-defense power forward? Oh, it was Mobley. Who was Julius Randle's two matchups in the playoffs? Literally the two best defensive power forwards in basketball. That's a thing. You throw that together with the fact that he was a little banged up and his three-point shot wasn't falling. We talked about it before the playoff, CT. I think it was before the Cavs series. And we said, look, if he's going to score in this series, he's going to have to make his threes and make his jumpers. Well, guess what? He didn't make his threes and make his jumpers. He just didn't. And look, that's a problem with him. That's a problem with RJ, right? That you just are not consistent enough shooting the ball. That's their problem. Now, the defense is an issue. It's way too up and down. He's way too, you don't know what you're going to get every game. The pouting after turnovers, not running back on defense is unacceptable. Can't have that. Now, I do think some people expect a guy that's 260 pounds to rotate on three-pointers and on defense like a 210-pound guard is probably asking a little bit much. But still, he would run out on these closeouts and not put his hands up. It's like stupid little things like that drive fans nuts, and I get it. But here's the bottom line, CT. They need his offense. Yeah. If anybody could watch these playoffs,
Not sure if that's on my end. We may have lost John for a minute. I'm sure he'll jump back in. Ladies and gentlemen.
We're back. Yep, no problem, CT. I will pick up. I paused. I will pick up where I left off. So if anybody watched these playoffs and watched how the Knicks struggled to score, and they say to themselves, we don't need Julius Randle's offense. Well, what games did the Knicks beat the Heat in? They were the ones where Julius Randle played well and scored. In game 2, he was spectacular. In game 5 in the second half, he was great in the second half of that game. They don't, and by the way, even in game 6 when he shot poorly, if he doesn't shoot all those free throws to make him in the third quarter to keep him in that game when Brunson's getting double teamed, they're not in the game at the end of game 6. So they need him to be good. He was not good enough. That's why they did not beat the Miami Heat. But you need someone to score. The other guys on this team are not good enough to carry the load with Brunson without Randle there, which is what makes this difficult in terms of figuring out a trade for Randle, because you have to get somebody and something back that's going to make up for his production and his scoring, because Brunson cannot do it all by himself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to your point, the front office values Randle a lot higher than many fans do. I feel. I don't think they're just going to try to throw him away unless they can get comparable value. They need to get better or the comparable value, maybe in another position or whatever it may be. Randle, they know how big he was for this team, but it's fair to say if you want to move forward in the playoffs, then it's fair to say you need to look at areas that you can maybe tinker and change that position, you know. Shooting-wise, I always felt it was a little bit up and down from 2 years ago in terms of players were sagging off, John. There wasn't quite on the scouting report yet. But I wanted to ask you about in terms of fit, because it seems like the conversation starts for fans with RJ, with Randle, and with Mitch. Do you feel like one of those three may need to go to fit better?
Yeah, maybe two. Maybe two. I mean, look, that's the thing. You know, how are you going to improve your shooting? Well, Brunson's your point guard, right? You have a guy like Grimes, who's a good shooter, quickly, who is still a little bit too inconsistent for my taste. He did not have a good postseason either, right? But he, at least you think he has it in him to be a good shooter on this team, right?
Yeah.
So what does that leave you? That leaves you your starting 3, which is RJ, your starting 4, which is Randle, and your starting 5, which is Mitch. And none of those 3, if you want to improve your efficiency as an offense and your shooting and your ability to spread the floor, those are the 3 guys you look at. You're going to have to get better and space the floor better at one, preferably 2 of those spots if you want to be a better, fluid, fitting offense around Jalen Brunson. So, yes, when they eventually make their move, CT, at least one of those guys are going to be going out in that trade, if not 2. And that's fine. I think, you know, in order to get better, you have to send something out. And I think the interesting thing when we kind of try to figure these trades out a little bit now is, who are you trading with, right? Do they want draft picks? Do they want players? Are they rebuilding? Are they trying to win now? And that'll kind of dictate what assets you're going to have to trade in those individual deals. And do we really know what all these teams are looking to do? Some are changing front offices, like the Wizards. You know, what are the Bulls going to look to do this year? You know, there are teams where you're not sure kind of where they're at. And I think that's going to make us trying to figure out some of these deals difficult, because a lot of it's going to depend on what other teams are looking to bring back in one of these trades.
Yeah, most definitely. You need to look at who has a need. I referenced this scenario with EJ, a used car salesman. What are they good at? They're good at taking advantage of somebody who has a need. They need to purchase a car. I think I look at the Clippers, John. I look at the Blazers. You know, Steve Ballmer, right? People think, oh, is he going to blow it up? I don't think he's going to blow it up, because they're moving into that. They're moving into that new arena, right? So maybe a third co-star, Julius Randle, is perfect in that third spot. Now I don't know what the Clippers have. Maybe it could be a 3-way. The Blazers, I also mentioned, you know, looking like if Dame does stay, maybe they want to bring him a bona fide number 2. Are there any other teams, or those teams can you feel like could seriously look at and benefit from a Julius Randle?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Dallas,
like
maybe another one.
Yeah, like I'll list some teams, and you can interrupt me and stop me. Toronto, are they a team that wants to rebuild and blow it up in a mass draft pick, or do they want to stay competitive, right? I don't know the answer to that, but if they're looking to get off of, you know, Siakam and OG Anunoby are both on expiring contracts. Randall's got 3 years left. He's on a good deal. You know, is that something that they would want to add? I don't know. My guess is that they're probably more of a blow it up and get picks type of scenario, but we'll see. The Washington Wizards, their owner has said they're never going to rebuild. They're never going to blow it up and tank. So
Yep.
could there be like a Randle Mitch for Porzingis sign and trade thing type deal? I don't know. Maybe
I'd be dark.
that's
Kuzma.
a team you could think about. Dallas, yeah, but what are you getting from Dallas? Like you would have to do a three-way deal because Dallas isn't going to give you anything back for Randle that I think is going to help you because they want to amass things around Luka, right? That's another team. You mentioned the Clippers. I agree. I don't think they're blowing things up. I don't see the Suns trading away Devin Booker or someone like that. You can throw that out the window. That's not going to happen. The Grizzlies, I don't think, are looking to move any of their really good players. The Hawks are not a team that I think will move anything.
Do you think the Bulls could be? Are they ever a team that tries to fully blow it up? They always seem
That's
to
a
try
good
to, like let's say they want to move out from DeRozan or from LaVine, but they want to stay relevant. Maybe they lose Vucevic in free agency, and a Mitchell Robinson is a nice piece for them.
Yes, I would not trade Randle for DeRozan. I just think Randle's, DeRozan's an expiring contract. He's way older. And, he's had his playoff difficulties himself. Yeah. I think he's a good player, but I think Randle is a more valuable player than DeRozan. I would make the Bulls give me something with DeRozan if you're sending them Julius Randle, because of his age and his contract, right? Yeah. I mean, this is a rent a player, and I think he's going to be 33 next year, right, DeRozan, if I'm not mistaken? That's ancient in NBA terms, right? And he's not a great three-point shooter either, so you're really solving your floor stretching issue with DeRozan. I think Randle's probably a higher percentage three-point shooter than DeRozan was this past season, to be honest with you. So is that solving your problem? Would I be willing to trade for DeRozan? Yeah, but again, rent the player 33 years old, you're not getting my prime assets for that guy. I would be more willing to think about Zach LaVine, but he has his own issues, right? I mean, he's got a knee. He's going to be making $40 million a year over 4 years. It's a big risk. You talk about not adding a poor defender next to Jalen Brunson, right? Well, he's not a very good defensive player. I mean, he's not a sieve, but he's not good. But he's a guy that can take over a game offensively. Look what he did to the Heat, right, in the play-in tournament. I mean, he put 40 on them in a half, and he knocked the Heat out of the play-in tournament. And they have to win their next game against the playoffs. So I think LaVine offensively is an answer, but I think all the other stuff is worrisome. The Timberwolves, what are they looking to do with Karl Anthony Towns? My problem with Karl Anthony Towns, CT, I don't know how you survive defensively with Brunson as your starting point guard and Towns as your starting center. Towns was so bad defensively, they felt like they had to trade 5 first-round picks for Rudy frickin' Gobert. That's the problem. And the way Tom Thibodeau especially runs his defense, you need the center to protect the rim. I don't trust Karl Anthony Towns to do that. I just don't see how that works. So I realize I'm saying no to everything and throw out teams that I maybe forgot. But you'll laugh. Guys in fit, Porzingis might be the best fit. Out of all the guys we've spoken to, now he's got the knee too. You're going to have to pay him $30+ million a year, so that's a worry. So, Paul George, right? I'd love to get Paul George. He's the perfect archetype player you want. Defending, big wing that can also score. Well, he's got injury issues and he's 33. I don't want to trade for anyone over 30, CT. The Knicks are a young team. Why am I trading young players and draft picks for a guy that's well over 30 when I have a really young roster and I have the luxury of maybe being a little bit patient here, at least for another year, while you have Brunson and Randle on these bargain contracts, right? So there are no easy answers. They all have flaws, but I think teams are going to be aggressive in moving some of these high-priced veterans or young veterans, however you want to look at it, because of the new CBA, right? How once you get over the second apron, you can't, trade multiple contracts together and aggregate salary. It's going to make it much more difficult for these teams with big-time payrolls to move players after this offseason. So I think teams will be aggressive in moving guys, but can the Knicks bring in guys for the right value where it's worth it? Like, I'd be willing to take a chance on Zach LaVine, but if does it cost me like RJ and maybe one unprotected first and maybe 2 protected ones, like the Pistons pick and the Wizards pick that they have? Yeah, then I'd be willing to do that. But something tells me another team's going to beat that offer, right? So
Yeah.
it's going to be a really, really tough and interesting offseason. I do not envy Leon Rose. This is not easy.
It's certainly not, man. There's very, very few perfect players, but perfect players that are available. Brandon Ingram, the chat always keeps bringing up. That seems
That's a
like a
good
guy
one.
with little to no risks involved, but how do you get him? Do you hope the Pelicans stumble and bumble for a few more years, or um, see? This is what I keep saying, John, about the Knicks timeline. We have Jalen Brunson, who's 26. The cap's changing, and we have all of our own draft picks. So is it worth just going all in now? You know, move some of your own draft picks if you need, and make a 2 or 3, 4 year run. Jalen Brunson's only 30 if it doesn't work out, and then you can reset again. But if you wait too many years, then you may only have one chance, one bite at the apple, with Jalen Brunson in his prime. So if every move is going to be risky, why not just make the move now? And then he's not even 30 yet if it doesn't work out. And then you have your future draft picks again in 3 more years because you've traded the
Right.
ones that you own now and then you get them back again.
No, look, I think your overall strategy makes sense. Now, for me, would it be the worst thing to run it back again this year if the right trade doesn't come along? I'd be okay with that. Use your mid-level, Dante DiVincenzo, Max Strus, whatever. Adam, there's a little bit of a help off the bench. That's fine. I think if you bring back this team next year, I think you'll win probably a game probably in the low 50s, 51, 52, something like that.
Yeah, I
And,
think so.
maybe you get a better matchup. You get out of the second round. You guys are healthier, whatever. But look, I think you make a good point, right? Because I don't, and again, maybe I'm underestimating the market. And I was the one that sat here last year, CT, telling everybody, no, Donovan Mitchell's going to cost you like 5 first-round picks and players. And that's what it's going to cost you. But I don't think any of the guys we've talked about, from Karl Anthony Towns to Zach LaVine to Porzingis, any of those guys that we talked about, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong, they're not Donovan Mitchell. Like, Mitchell's better than all of those guys. So I don't think the cost would be that high. So can you make a trade where you don't sell out all your assets, to your point? You try it for a couple years. And if it doesn't work, then you can try to figure something out again down the road. I think there is some logic to that. But I do think you should, or maybe not even should's the right word, but you have to make your all in, and I'm using my rabbit ear quotes for that, all in move before Brunson's contract is up, because you got to make that move while he's on this cheap deal.
100%.
You can't wait for remember, it's only 2 more years, but that player option in the 4th year, guess what? He's not taking it. So you have him on this cheap contract for 2 more off seasons.
Yep.
That's it. This one and next. So that's when you're gonna have to do something. So you can't wait that long.
No, indeed. I completely forgot about that player option, and that contract descending is looking amazing. And the Mitchell Robinson contract descending also. But a question I want to ask you attached to all of this is Tibbs's input on player fits, and I guess generally Tibbs's age, because Tom Thibodeau's 68 or 67. He wants to win right now. And I think based on this year's success, he has a legit reason to go to Leon and say, hey, like, we are closer than you think, Leon. Get me that help. Let's make that move now. So a 2-part question would be, how much input do you think Tibbs is going to have on players now? Exhibit A, Josh Hart, and Exhibit B, Cam Reddish. How in lockstep is Tibbs going to be with Leon in terms of any player acquisition now?
Good question. I mean, this is a pretty. I think it goes 2 ways, right? This is a front office where there's a lot of different voices and a lot of people have input, right? From Worldwide Wes to Brock Aller to Gerson Rosas, who's, I don't remember what his newest title is. Used to be a consultant. They did name him something else. I don't remember what it is.
Okay.
And then you have Thibodeau, right? So you do have a lot of different voices, but I do think they talk to the coach. And I think if Thibodeau says, look, this guy's not going to work, I think they listen to him. That's why as much as, Karl Anthony Towns is interesting because he's a guy that I think the front office has connections to through, CAA back in the day. Yeah. He's a local kid. He'd love to come home, all that blah, blah, blah stuff that really in the end doesn't matter, but it does in terms of connections.
Yeah.
But look, Tom Thibodeau is going to call Jimmy Butler up, and he's going to ask Jimmy Butler what he thinks about Karl Anthony Towns. Jimmy Butler is going to say that guy doesn't want to win, or he doesn't, he doesn't have it in him to be that. Jimmy Butler met Karl Anthony Towns. He couldn't get out of Minnesota fast enough. So,
That's true.
and then he watches him on tape and knows how he defends. I cannot believe Tom Thibodeau will be like, yeah, I want Karl Anthony Towns. I think that's a great fit for me.
Yeah.
So, I just don't see that. But if Thibodeau's neutral on something, but maybe doesn't love it, I think they would still make that type of move if it means bringing another star. And I do think the front office feels pressure to all these compiled assets to combine them into something that'll improve your team a little bit. So I do think it's important to be patient. I think CT we should be confident because this front office has been patient. I think too patient for some Knicks fans, but it worked last offseason, which I think was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And they and I think you hope they just don't try to rush it this offseason and do the wrong thing.
They believed in Brunson. They knew kind of how good he was, and it eventuated. But leaning towards RJ Barrett now, there's a reason why I feel like I would prefer to keep him over Randle and Mitch if we're talking about those big pieces moving on, because I think RJ Barrett definitely demonstrated the ability to play two-way. The growth in the playoffs mentally, he seems to be a good fit, and I think his defense can improve as he continues. With Julius Randle's defense, I think that's on his scouting report now forever. I don't feel like we saw that in the playoffs twice. I know the ankle to some degree, but I feel like a lot of it is will and want. John, with Julius Randle, I could see RJ Barrett and the fact that he's younger. So, what are your thoughts about RJ Barrett's fit, along with maybe in any centerpiece deal that we make around him and Brunson?
I'd be okay trading RJ. I was happy with him in the postseason. I thought he played some pretty good basketball, but he's still not a number 2 to me. I think he's a number 3 or a number 4. I was impressed with his ability to play off the ball better than he has before. I thought he did make some better decisions, especially in the Cleveland series. He also caught a heater, right? He was 50% from the field, 38% from 3 in the playoffs, which is much better. I think that was actually going into that final game against Miami when he was terrible. But that, he just shot the ball a lot better than he did in the regular season, and he finished better, hit some more threes. So, yes, I feel better about RJ after the playoffs, but I still don't think he is a perfect fit either. Because while, yes, I agree he's a better defender than Randle, and I think he has more defensive potential than Randle, he's also, I think he's a guy that's better against stronger and bigger players at the 3, but he's not super big. I think he's not very good navigating screens, and he's not a great defensive rebounder either. He lets too many guys beat him the ball sometimes. But look, if RJ's back next year, I think you make it work. But again, if one of your perimeter players cannot shoot and spread the floor, it makes things more difficult for everyone else. So is he the perfect complementary player? No. Can he be a good complementary player? I think he showed in the playoffs he could. But remember, CT, that's a small sample size. And RJ's been a guy over the course of his career where he's had awesome stretches and then terrible stretches. Well, what if he just caught one of his really good stretches? Is that a sign of progress, or did you just catch a really good stretch? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know anybody does. We'll know next year. But I wouldn't completely change my tune on a small sample size in the playoffs. Though, again, I thought he played well. I think you feel better about him. I now think you treat him as more than just salary filler, and you say, no. He's got real value on this contract now, so you got to get something back for him. So I think it helps his trade value, but I would not pull him off the table by any means in a potential trade. And I'd be open to trading him, and I'd be open to trading Randle, to be honest with you. I think it depends what the other team wants, what you're getting back position-wise, because now you're really talking about fit, right, as much as you're talking about talent. So that's going to dictate which one of those guys you have to deal in a trade to get the type of player back that you want and you need.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm with you on that in terms of I would love to keep RJ. I think the contract he can outplay that, and I think you need to think of him as an asset because he can continue to grow. He's only, we keep mentioning his age, but I feel like his ability to get to the cup, if we can bring in more shooting at the 4 or the 5, and we're about to hit on Mitchell Robinson's fit, because I feel like personally that's the biggest area where offensively we're really missing out. And even if we do keep Mitch, a backup center that is a real stretch 5 is going to open up this offense, John. And there's a world where I would be okay running it back with RJ and Randle if we had a different look at the five.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because I really think out of maybe the three, Mitchell Robinson elevated his trade value arguably more than the other two.
Yeah, I agree. Look, and we talked about it. You got to just improve your spacing and shooting at one of those spots. And if it's center, that's great. I think that works. I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
The problem is that there's not that many stretch fives anymore. You went through a period where there were a million stretch fives out there. There just aren't that many of them anymore. I mentioned Porzingis. I think that is a sneaky fit, and I wouldn't rule that out in terms of some type of move at some point.
Yeah.
And just back to RJ for a second, I do think it's important to note he really benefited from the way teams in the playoffs shifted to Brunson and Randle. Now, to his credit, he took advantage of the extra space and the attention on other people, but it wasn't as though they were running the offense through RJ and getting points, right? They were running the offense through Randle and Brunson. They would swing the ball to an open RJ. He would attack a closeout. He would take it open three, and he would take advantage of the defense not being set for him. We saw what happened, though, CT, when he was out there, but Brunson and Randle weren't. The offense was a disaster. So he's not a guy that's ready to have the offense run through him. He's not there yet when the defensive set. But again, I think he took great progress in terms of being a supporting player and attacking advantages created by his teammates, which is what you want out of a support player. So that's great. But again, I still think the shooting needs to get better. But yeah, look, if you want to, CT, the only guys I don't want to trade on this roster right now are Brunson. I really don't want to trade Quentin Grimes because I think he is the shooting defense combination that'll help in any lineup configuration you want. Yeah. And I'd even be hesitant to trade quickly. I think he has a better potential to fit in for any team long term than Randle, Barrett, and Mitch. To your point, all three create different areas of concern, balancing your starting lineup: offense, defense, shooting, spacing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how I look at it.
100%. Unfortunately, on Grimes and Quickly, one of the reasons why they're so valuable is because they're on rookie contracts still, and eventually they're not going to be on rookie contracts. So you are going to have to trade, perhaps IQ for a team in a bigger deal because he has arguably the biggest value. IQ's
look,
value.
I think it's match. Look, it's also matching salary, right? I mean, so that's part of this too. Luckily, you have the expiring in Fournier. You have the potentially expiring in Rose if they pick up the option on that. So they have some expiring. And that's why they're set up so well, CT, right? You have expiring deals. You have young players on rookie contracts. You have young players on bigger contracts. You have veteran guys on medium contracts, veteran guys on bigger contracts. So they have a really good mix of guys here that you could put together to make a trade to make this work.
Yeah, and picks also you could throw in. But yeah, in terms of a move, I'm going to give you this scenario where I think, and it's a point I'll make, where I think Leon Rose needs to be bold. And again, I think we all agree that one of these major pieces or two should really be heavily considered to be moved to make that upgrade. But there's some moves that I think Leon could have done to help us get even better this year. And there was talks with Indiana over Obi Toppin for a Chris Duarte, a sort of a need-for-need swap. Need for Indiana, need for the Knicks. Maybe we can revisit that. I think they probably will. Maybe we could get Indiana have 2 draft picks, 29 and 26. I think Leon Rose might try to get one of them. And then there was Kevin Love, funnily enough. Kevin Love was on the waiver wire, and the Miami Heat picked him up. So a lot of people talk about blockbusters, but a what-if scenario could have been if the Knicks had made that trade with Obi at the deadline, got Chris Duarte, got some shooting off the bench, and then suddenly you're looking at a scenario where Kevin Love wasn't on the Heat, he was on the Knicks as a backup stretch 4. That could have got us past Miami. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, and I think if Kevin Love never leaves Cleveland, I think that series is a lot tougher too, to be honest with you, given how they struggled behind Allen and Mobley there too, to be honest with you. I mean, they had no backup for those two guys, and they had to play small, and the Knicks killed them on the glass. But look, I would be, and I'm not an Obi Toppin hater. I think he's fine. I'm not an Obi Toppin. Oh, if you play him, he'd score 22 and 10, and he'd be an all star. Like I'm not that guy either. I think he's going to be a fine NBA player for a long time and playing in the right role. But
Yeah.
look, it's hard here. We've been talking about that since they drafted him. They have Julius Randle, who's really good, and he's going to take all of his minutes. And the Knicks don't run the type of offense that's going to help a guy that can run, cut, and finish. The Knicks run a heavy isolation offense. Obi Toppin is not an isolation player. He's just not great at creating his own shot. So for all those reasons and the fact that he's heading into the last year of his contract, they'll have to decide whether or not they want to pay him. I think it does make sense to move him this year. I think if you can get a guy like Duarte who can be that kind of wing player that the Knicks need that can help you, I think he's a bit of a two-way player too. That I think that would be a deal that would make a lot of sense for both sides. So my guess is that the Knicks would have to probably, if they're getting a pick too, they're probably gonna have to put something else into that deal to make it happen because I think Duarte is more value than Toppin does, at least in my opinion. I don't know what the league thinks of that, but that would be. I agree with you. I think that's something I would definitely explore.
Yeah. And it's linked to my point where I think the Knicks and the front office shouldn't be kind of attached to these connections or sentimental. They're going to have to make a hard decision on Randle, RJ, or Obi, players that they love, which I don't think they've been shown yet. We haven't seen that yet. So maybe do we see it? Hopefully. I don't think, like we all kind of agree, Brunson, maybe Grimes, and everyone else should be available. And if you want to ultimately win a championship, you need to decide, like, are we going to be ruthless? Are we going to be bold? And that's what I want the Knicks to be this season. Like, I wouldn't be mad if we ran it back, but I just think now is the time to kind of be bold and make a hard decision and just roll with it. Now,
Who do you want?
We can't.
I'm going to ask you,
sit
CT.
on our
Who do you
hands.
want? Who do you want, CT?
Who do I
I'm
want?
asking you.
Yeah, I want to stretch 4 or 5. I know fans feel a certain way about KP. Look, he played 65, 70 games this season. I think if it's a good number, that's an option. I like Kuzma at the 3. I like a bit of extra wing and size. And then
He's
like
almost a 4 now, right? Kuzma isn't Kuzma
Yeah.
almost a 4 at this point?
He is, yeah. I like stretch 5 too. I love me some Mitch. And I got a question for you about Tom Thibodeau's love of rim protection. That's central to his defensive scheme. So how much does Tibbs try to cling on to a Mitch or a Hartenstein, or do you think he'd be open to a Cat stretch 4 or 5 with Brook Lopez?
I don't think Milwaukee's going to let Lopez go. I think they'll figure out a way to keep him. I think Porzingis and Lopez offer enough ring protection where you're fine. The Bucks' whole defense is not dissimilar to what the Knicks have done, right? They funnel and they rim protect and they give up some threes. So I think he'd be okay with Lopez or Porzingis because Porzingis is actually a pretty darn good rim protector. You look at his advanced numbers in terms of protecting the rim; they're good. So I don't think you're losing. You're losing some there, but you're not losing a ton. Karl-Anthony Towns is a real problem, dude. Like, as much as Julius Randle hurts you defensively, and he does, you can hide him at the 4 a lot easier than you can hide Karl-Anthony Towns at the
5. Yeah.
It's really hard.
I haven't watched him
Towns
enough.
is not mobile enough to guard 4. So, again, I said this earlier in the show. Cat was so bad defensively, they had to trade 5 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert. That's a panic move. I mean, let's call it what it is. That is a panic move. So I don't.
Did you know he missed 50 games? Apparently, I did watch a Minnesota podcast, and he was dealing with an injury this year. So, if you're just basing it on this year, or are you basing it on what you've seen for a few years with Cat?
In terms of his defense, I think that's his career. I mean, I just don't think he's been a very good defensive player. I know people have made excuses. He had all the off-court stuff with his family that one year. I sympathize with that, obviously. This year he was hurt a lot. But, again, he just doesn't move his feet very well. He doesn't jump very well. And I don't think he's very great instinctually, defensively.
Yeah, he's slow.
And if you ever had put him on Randle on the court at the same time, dude, with Brunson, you'd give up literally 1 million points per game.
Tibbs will pull the 2 strands of hair he has left.
Oh, it'd be terrible. No, Tibbs might have a heart attack and die on the sideline. Like that's how bad it might be. So it's look, if you get Towns, you better bring a really good defensive four in there that can block shots. Like, and who's that guy? Does that guy exist in the NBA these days? I don't even know the answer to that.
Yeah, exactly right. The chat mentioned Miles Turner, Buddy Hield with Indiana. We always seem to hear Miles Turner's name linked because of the connections, but didn't Indiana re-up him?
Yeah, I mean, look, I know people like him because he shoots threes. The problem, he doesn't hit many of them. Like,
We
he's
thought
fine. Like,
Hartenstein was at stretch
yeah, I
five.
just don't think he's that big of an upgrade, to be honest with you. Like that to me doesn't move the needle. Buddy
Yeah,
Hield, no thanks. I'd rather go and sign a Max Strus or a Dante DiVincenzo or somebody
yeah,
like that with the mid level than
yeah.
trade for Hield. And somebody else in the comments had mentioned, oh, maybe Leon Rose can figure out a way to get Mikal Bridges from the Brooklyn Nets. An
That's not
asteroid could be
happening.
heading towards Earth, ready to exterminate all of the human race. And to save everybody, the Nets would have to trade Michael Bridges to James Dolan. They would not do it, and
Yeah.
we all die a fiery death. So, no,
Yeah.
the Nets are not trading Michael Bridges to the New York Knicks. I wish it. He's perfect. He is perfect for what they need.
Exactly.
Never going to happen. And I love
29
Michael
other
Bridges.
teams.
People killed me for 3 years, but I would not let go of the fact that the Knicks drafted Kevin Knox instead of him. I never understood it at the time, and it's just dumbest thing in the world. He's perfect. I love Michael Bridges. Love him to death. There's no way the Nets ever in a million years trade him to the Knicks.
I don't think I think I heard Bobby Mark say that there's never been a New Jersey / Brooklyn New York Knicks trade in history. I think there's an unspoken kind of thing that they're just not going to do a deal. So I don't know. I mean, I would take a Cam Johnson even, but
Sure.
you know, what are some other dudes that you just don't want any part of, like a James Harden, a Lillard? Is we always hear Kelly Oubre's name,
Okay, yeah. Kelly
OG
Oubre, no thank you.
OG
Get him out of
Anunoby.
here. No thanks. Get him out. Don't want Kelly Oubre. Malik Beasley, I think, is a name we'll probably hear a little bit of this offseason. I
Yeah,
don't I don't mind Malik Beasley, but I just wonder, why he couldn't get on the floor, this year after that trade. So, that's something that, worries me a little bit. He does shoot the three fairly well though, but it is what it is. Um, who else do I want? Kelly Oubre, no. No one over. Look, I don't want anyone that's well over 30 years old unless you're not giving up a lot to get that guy. Like Bogdanovich from Detroit. Like, I think
Detroit.
he's a good
Yep,
fit. He's what they need, but he's 33. So if you can get him, but it doesn't cost you a lot, like if it costs you like one protected first round pick, what I consider doing it, sure.
yep.
But here's the other thing, CT. You bring one of these like helpful guys in that's going to help. Where are the minutes coming from? Are you taking minutes away from Barrett? Are you taking minutes away from Grimes? Are you taking minutes away from Hart? These minutes have to come from somewhere
Yeah,
quickly.
exactly.
So I
Deuce.
don't know how that's going to work.
What about Jeremy Grant and DeRozan?
Yeah, look, DeRozan, again, I think it works, but again, he doesn't solve your floor spacing issue, but he's a great one-on-one scorer. So again, I think the cost is what matters for DeRozan. If you can get him on the cheap, yeah, why not? Go for it. But if he's costing you, Grimes or quickly
Yep.
and picks, I don't know. And then you have to match salary. So if you're matching salary, do they want RJ or Randle in a trade like that? And that's a non-starter to me. I mean, again, expiring contract, 33 years old. For me, I think your value there isn't exactly what you want it to be. Grant's interesting because he is going to be a free agent. I think Portland's going to do everything they can to sign him, right? Because Lillard wants him back, and I think he said it publicly that he wants him back, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I think he could be a replacement for Randle, maybe. I don't think you can have both those guys on the same roster. So if Grant's coming in, Randle's got to go out.
I
Is that
agree.
necessarily an upgrade to you? I think Grant's much better defensively, but he's probably not as good offensively. So,
I can see that.
I mean, fine, but that doesn't get me super excited. Even a Siakam, I mentioned before, Siakam's a really good player, but again, he's on an expiring deal, and is he that much of an upgrade over Randle? Again, much better defensively, but he's not as good of an offensive player. So,
You realize
whatever.
a lot of this is a lot, and you would know a lot of Knicks fans are looking at it like it's the shiny toy in the window over there. and we've seen our guys' shortcomings, and we don't see the other guys' shortcomings. You know, a lot of fans, you said it, will just want off of Julius Randle at all costs because they've seen him in the playoffs now twice, and the effort and all of the issues throughout the season. It was a good season, but I just don't know if some Knicks fans can deal with the same storyline popping up again. Now, can you imagine if it pops up again throughout next year in the season again? Like, what's going to happen? Or
Hey,
maybe
look,
you just wait to the trade deadline.
yeah, look, that's possible, right? See if a team is out of it
Yeah.
and they decide to move one of their stars. You can do that for sure. You know, and then somebody had in the chat here, do you sell high on RJ? You know, was that his high watermark? What happens if he goes back to being the streaky player in the regular season next year and all of a sudden he looks much harder to move? And I think you can make the same argument for Randle, right? And I know
Yeah.
you're not selling high on Randle because of his postseason, because his postseason was bad. But we do remember what happened to Randle in the regular season following his last All-NBA season, right? That did
Yeah.
not go well. You know, is there any guarantee that doesn't happen again? You figure Brunson and his presence will help, you know, prevent a backslide like that. But, I mean, look, can anyone predict Julius Randle at this point? I mean, the guy's all over the place. I can't. I don't think you can either. So that's why I'm open. I'm willing to be. I'm willing, maybe not quite as aggressive as UCT, but I'm open to moving guys to try to improve the team because I think what this team is now and the way they play, it has a fairly high floor, right? Especially in the regular season. You work hard, you offensive rebound the hell out of the ball, you play harder than everybody else, you have really good depth, your bench is an advantage in the regular season. Randall's going to play 75 games and he's going to bludgeon you to death. Brunson's really good. Has a high floor in the regular season. I'm not sure how high the ceiling is when you just don't shoot the ball well enough. And the Knicks had a really good offensive rating, but it was because of offensive rebounding and protecting the ball. It wasn't because of efficient shooting, right? So
Yeah.
I just think they have a little bit of a limited ceiling here.
Ceiling.
I don't want to sell out all the assets and young talent to get a medium or small improvement with some veteran that's on an expiring deal. That doesn't do it for me either. You know, the Knicks are a young roster. This isn't, we have to go all in to win this year no matter what situation. You can be patient and pick the right guy. But to your point and the point you made before, look, Brunson, you got to make this move before he's off this contract in 2 off seasons. So it's a tough needle to thread.
Yeah, it 100% is. And if you're looking at offense and defense, I feel like our roster is a bit askew where defense is prioritized a bit too much with Mitch, with Hart. It's just too many guys like Barrett, too many guys that weren't able to score in the playoffs. I didn't feel like our defense was the reason we lost. I felt like it was our offense. So if you bring in a sharpshooter off the bench, Duncan Robinson type dude, and you keep everyone else, okay, maybe that balances it out better.
Absolutely. Look, you need, and this goes back to the point I made before, right? The Knicks have 2 guys that can create their own shot against the set defense. Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson. And Randle shot like garbage in the postseason. Yeah. And they had no one else. And we saw when those 2 guys, look, I have to go back and look again. I think in the games that Brunson and Randle were healthy, when they were on the floor together, the Knicks were a positive plus minus. They outscored the Heat. Like they were, when the Knicks were at full strength with their starters on the floor, they were a better team than the Miami Heat. I believe that if Randall's healthy in game 1 and Grimes is able to play his normal complement of minutes, I think they beat the Heat in game 1, and I think we're playing in game 7. I honestly believe that. So I don't think they're that far away, but I do think you have some structural problems with the scoring and the shooting that need to be addressed if you want to compete for a championship. Because as good as Brunson is, he's undersized. He's not super athletic. He can't do it all himself. He needs some help, which is why I think you're going to have to consolidate, trade some assets and young players maybe some fans don't want to part with, to find guys that can help you. But then you also risk destroying the identity of the team, right? And once you start trading some of these guys that allowed you to win the way you did last year, does that hurt the overall team result? Even if you're fixing the problem you were trying to fix, does it hurt you in other areas that cancels it out? So, again, that's why it's a really, really tough offseason to figure out what move to make.
It is, yeah, super tough. But we're sitting in a great position, and we're peeping the Celtics Heat score, John. The Celtics are cooking right now, 67-51, halfway through the third. So it could be deja vu, headed to a game 6. What do you
Wow,
think about
Derek,
it, Jay?
wow, yeah.
Yeah, what was that?
I'm sorry, Derek White and Marcus Smart have 29 combined points.
Whoa.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, role players playing better at home. And what do you feel like a Jalen Brown, the future holds with that? Are you turned off at all by this playoff run, or is Jalen Brown still someone you would want? And then I got to ask you, who do you want?
That's a good question. I don't think there's a perfect player, to be honest with you. I like Jalen Brown. I think he has faults. I think he drives some Knicks fans crazy the same way Randle does with some of his turnovers and stuff. But
Hmm.
he's a two-way player. You know, he's not an All-NBA defender, but he's a good enough. I mean, they put him on the other team's best player a lot. I mean, he's a good defensive player.
Yep.
He can shoot it a little. He's a better shooter than Randle. You can play him as a small ball four. You know, I think if you have to, right? You know, you've seen him and Tatum play the 3 and the 4 a little bit from time to time over the course of the playoffs and the regular season. So, you know, but he's more of a wing, obviously. But I think, you know, he's a guy for me that, yes, but again, he's coming up for a supermax. You know, I think Zach LaVine's a pretty good player too. I think Brown's better than him, but at 40
Yep.
million a year, it's like, ooh, not sure. You know, and how do you feel about Jalen Brown when you got to pay him the supermax? You know, because that's what it's
Oh,
going to take to get him. Right.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So all of a sudden, really good player, but how about really good player on the contract you got to pay him on? Then all of a sudden, you're like, I'm not sure. Throw on top of the fact, do you really think the Celtics going to sign and trade, or is going to trade that guy in the division
In the
to the Knicks?
division.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it. And the Knicks are never going to have the cap space in 2 years to sign him.
Same
They're
with
just not going to
Embiid.
have the money. So I don't know how that's going to work. I would love Jalen Brown. I think he's exactly what they need. Like, if I could get Jalen Brown for RJ, Randle, and like a couple of first-round picks, do I do that? Yes, sayonara. Let's sign me up. Let's go. Let's rock.
Yep.
I do it in a second. But
Yeah.
they're going to want more than that. And again, I just don't think the Celtics are going to trade Jalen Brown to the Knicks.
That's going to be a tough trade to make. And you said with the salary also, I'm more inclined to look at the 5 spot. I think with Embiid, with Cat, I just feel like that's where Leon Rose is leaning towards. If I'm going to make a guess, educated guess right now. But with the draft, do you really feel like the Knicks will find a way into the second round or the end of the first round? Could you see that happening?
By the way, one of our listeners here put a comment in there. You know, look at
Yep.
Embiid. That's one guy we haven't mentioned yet. CT is Embiid, and we probably
Yep.
should have. I don't think they're ready to trade him yet. And then I'll answer your question. I think Harden's going to leave, but I don't think they're ready to completely bail on that yet. And now that's a deal where that's going to cost you everything, right? Embiid is all your picks and a lot of your young players. So you're talking your whole pick complement, RJ, Mitch, and then pick your poison of Quickly and Grimes. Like, it's the full Donovan Mitchell package plus. That's going to
Plus.
be a load. And look,
Maury.
he's great, but I don't know how you're not worried about his constant injuries in the playoffs, because it happens. He's the big man version of Chris Paul, right? I love
Yeah.
Chris Paul, great player. Dude can't stay healthy in the playoffs. Embiid is the exact same way. So that makes me nervous. And again, has a monster contract too. But he's a great player. Like, if you can promise me that he's going to be healthy in the playoffs, I'd give up all that for Embiid.
That's the
But
issue.
But you know, there are no guarantees in life, right? So I don't know. Yes, I think the
Yeah.
Knicks will figure out a way to get into the first round or second round. That they can always buy a second round pick, which would be fine. I could see them trying to use Obi to get back into the first round of this draft.
Yeah.
Because I know
Yep.
they probably don't think they can pay him, and maybe there's a player that they like. I think that's what they do. Maybe they package, you know, Obi for a pick. Maybe they package 2 of their future protected picks for a first round pick. You could do something like that too, right? Like, you trade their 2 bad protected picks, like the Pistons one and the Wizards one, something like that, and you trade them for
Yeah.
a first round pick this year. That's something you could do. I could see that. So yeah, I do think they will try to add a young player in the draft. You don't want to go 2 straight drafts without adding anyone. that can kind of hurt your overall team building with young guys. And I think this front office has shown they can find gems late in the first round, and I think they'll try to do that again.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when our roster has a skill need of shooting. You could kind of find that in a sweet spot. And I think that Indy deal is out there again. Duarte, maybe the 29th pick, and send the Moby. We'll wait to see. What are your thoughts on DeAndre Ayton? Also, we haven't mentioned him.
I saw that, and then Manchild says in the chat too, why would Philly trade Embiid to a division rival? Great point. Same thing I said about Jalen Brown, right? Like, why would they trade him in the division? Good point.
The best deal? Maybe.
I mean, at that point, Philly is in. If they're trading, Embiid, it's basically the process too, right? So you're going to be so bad that it might not matter who you're trading him to. While I think the Celtics with Jason Tatum are trading Jalen Brown to still compete, right? They're not trading Jalen Brown to be crappy. They're trading him to get better. So that's why I think maybe Philly would be a little bit more willing to do it than Boston would be. I've had people mention Ayton to me. And by the way, it's amazing how many really good players, CT, have we mentioned that could get moved this offseason. That's why this offseason could be wacky and bizarre. All these, we've mentioned probably 10 All-Stars over the course of the show.
It will be. Bradley Beal,
crazy,
we haven't mentioned.
So that's why it's going to be so tough for the Knicks to kind of pick the right guy and the right deal to make this happen. Boy, I think you can get Ayton for very little. So is that a guy that's worth
pennies
trading low on? Right. I mean, you could probably trade Mitch for him straight up or something close to that.
Yeah.
Just so the Suns can get off that contract. Like, it probably wouldn't cost much more than that, to be honest with you.
He's out of there.
Yeah, and again, maybe
CP3, you could probably get him.
Yeah, look, and maybe the Suns with the new coach, they think whoever they hire to replace Monty Williams can bond with Ayton, and you can fix that situation. That's possible. I don't know, but I mean, I wouldn't trade a lot for Ayton. I think there's some danger signs there that he played so poorly after signing the big contract. I think he wants to shoot and score a lot. He's not content with being a guy that's going to be a defender, rebounder type, which is kind of what Tom Thibodeau likes in that thing. So, put all that together, I would probably try to avoid Ayton, to be honest with you, unless you can really get him on the cheap. But again, that contract with the new CBA CT, we even mentioned this, you got to worry about paying too many guys. As you get above that apron, you pay the tax, you can only make certain types of trades, you lose all your mid-level exceptions and veteran exceptions, all that sort of stuff. So you really have to be careful about who you pay, because you get to a certain point, you're paying too many guys, and the Knicks are going to have to pay quickly coming up. You're going to have to re-up Brunson like we talked about earlier. You start paying guys a ton of money that don't deserve it. That same thing with LaVine, right? In a potential LaVine trade, it becomes very difficult to build your team, which I think you have to worry about.
Yeah, you do. There's so many people in the front office, like you said, with different agendas and the Kentucky connection, CAA. But that's why I do feel like Mitchell Robinson on his value contract will probably be a guy they try to keep longer, unless he's a part of a huge deal. But yeah, it goes back to Randle and Barrett's contract are pretty friendly. But in terms of a contract, that's not, you mentioned, Cat, LaVine, injury concerns, but I do feel like they're the most gettable. If you're to put a little ranking, who do you think's the most likely, if you can see something happening?
I think if I had to put, it's a good question.
Because if
I had to put odds on it.
We have seen reports that, there's links to Cat, there is links to certain guys.
I think Zach LaVine. If I had to say the most likely guy, I think it's LaVine, and here's why. I'll give you my list of reasons why. And I like LaVine more than other people do. So Knick fans kill me for this because they think I'm nuts. But here's why. He plays the position you need, right? He's a 2-3. He's a wing. The Knicks need to improve at that spot. That's number one. Number two, he's a really good scorer. He's a good isolation player. He's a good pick and roll player. The Knicks' entire offense is isolation and pick and roll. So I think immediately he fits in well what they like to do. Three, he's only 27 years old, I believe, going on 28. So he fits into the timeline with the young veterans the Knicks players have. Now, we talked about the minuses. Defense, you're going to have two backcourt guys in Brunson and LaVine that don't play D enough. Contract, Nate. So those are the three things you worry about. And I think the question, CT, that we have to figure out is what's the price on LaVine? Like if the Bulls decide to blow it all up and they move everyone, right? They start from scratch.
Yeah.
What are teams going to be willing to give them for a guy like LaVine, who's obviously young and talented, but on that onerous contract? And that's where I think it kind of gets difficult as to what the Knicks would have to give up. So many of these good teams have given up all their assets already. There's just not that many teams with that many assets to get players. Would Oklahoma City trade their slew of picks for Zach LaVine? Would Utah trade their slew of picks for Zach LaVine? It doesn't feel like that's a move those teams would make. Exactly. So then you get to the Knicks. How many picks does it take? How many players does it take? Maybe there's a combination. I talked about it. Like, as many issues as LaVine has, he's a better player than RJ Barrett. And I think he's always going to be. I don't think RJ is ever going to be as good as Zach LaVine is right now. I just don't. In terms of, now, you talk about contracts and health, that puts other factors into it. But if you can get LaVine for RJ and, maybe one unprotected picks and a couple of protected picks, I think that's probably worth it for me. That's a that's a chance worth taking. That if it doesn't work out, you can recover it, right? Because you still have all your picks down the road. You only traded one of your own picks. You only trade a couple of your protected picks. And I don't think RJ is going to be a star, but I think LaVine, when he's on, can be a star. So to me, that's a chance worth taking, but I'm not sure you're going to be able to get him for that little. That might cost more than that. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, no, pause. I don't know if that's worth it to the Knicks. So it all depends on price. But I think LaVine's more likely than Towns, just because, again, I think Thibodeau is going to raise his hand on Karl-Anthony Towns and say, dude, like, I can't play with this guy at center. Defensively, I just can't do it. So that's my feel for it. I could end up being wrong, because I think both guys are gettable. And I think both guys have the potential of screwing this thing up. But I think I really think they do. I think both guys have the potential of screwing it up. But I think of the two, LaVine has the better chance of putting them over the top than Towns. I think LaVine, if he stays healthy and he figures out some of his issues with decision-making and defense, has a better chance of putting the Knicks over the top than Towns does, who I think has some real structural, unfixable problems that I think would be difficult to roster build around.
Yeah. To me, I agree with your point that there's less risk. The contract is better than Kat's and Embiid's contract. I think it peaks at 45 or 48, whereas Kat gets up to 55 and Embiid also. But yeah, we need shooting in the playoffs. With LaVine, I'm worried they're going to ask for a quickly. Barrett probably would be in the conversation as well. But I agree with you in terms of likeliness, and here's why. The Chicago Bulls, Vucevic is an unrestricted free agent. DeRozan is 34 or something. The Chicago Bulls got to do something. They cannot run that thing back.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Bulls are a team you look at. I think the Raptors are a team you look at. There's a lot of there's a lot of rumors too that if the Rockets go and sign James Harden, that they're going to look to add people to go with him, right? To give him some veteran help. So I think that's another team you look at. But who do the Rockets have? Would you want to get the 5th overall pick? Is that something you'd be interested in? I don't know answer to that.
I'd take Sengun and Tari Eason.
Yeah, and then you have and the name's escaping me. Who was the 2nd overall pick 2 years ago?
Jalen Green.
The guard who's super athletic.
Yeah, Jalen Green.
Yeah, Green. Like, again, are they looking to move him? Like, yeah, I'd roll the dice on him for sure. He's an unbelievable athlete and he can score. He's a mess defensively, but I think as a young guy, you hope he can kind of figure some of that stuff out.
Yeah. Most definitely. Well, yeah, it's been great having you on to talk about it. And as we get closer into the thick of the summer buzz and the draft, we'll touch base again. But anything else you want to get out there, John?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. That's I like to come on these podcasts when I do them, and I come on these different shows and have a bunch of answers for people on how I would approach this. I don't think there's a lot of easy answers here, and I have not had a chance to kind of sit down and go through every possible option yet. I will at some point, and then we can come on and do this again. But there's not a perfect solution here. There's not a perfect answer, and I think Whatever they do has a chance of screwing this up, and it has a chance of helping. And you just hope you find the right balance there. And I think it's hard. And if there are Giant fans out there, just real quickly, I'll do a little promotion stuff for our Giants podcast network.
Yeah.
Big Blue Kickoff Live, Giants Huddle podcast. So check it out. We're still live every day on Giants.com at 12:30. We take calls, talk Giants, and then Giants Huddle podcast is our interview podcast. You can subscribe to both of them. Just search for them on your favorite podcast platform, or search for it on the Giants app. Check it out. We're going strong. We'll take a little break around the 4th of July. Otherwise, we do shows all year round. So football season's coming around, but we're going to have a lot of fun with the NBA offseason before that happens. So the Knicks and the NBA will rule the next 2 months, and then the NFL will take over at the start of August here for preseason. But this is the NBA's time, man. The offseason is going to be wild. It's going to be crazy. If I had to guess, the Knicks will do something, and I think we all just hope it'll be the right thing that makes them better, and then they don't mess this thing up.
Yeah, agree, 100%. Yeah, everyone follow at SCHMEELK on Twitter, and doing the great work with the Giants daily, and NBA offseason buzz continues. The Celtics are up by 18. Looks like we're going to a game 6, and the Knicks fans maybe got to feel good in terms of how closer we're getting, and we know how close we are. But yeah, John, let's talk soon.
Good stuff, CT. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, appreciate you. Have a great night, and chat soon.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, John SCHMEELK, the one, the only, doing great work with the New York Giants, New York Knicks talk, formerly on WAFAN. We'll continue to rock out a little bit, take some of the questions that we may not have hit on, but yeah, appreciate the chat, everyone out here rocking out, and like a lot of great points we talked about with John in terms of the moves to make. There ain't a clear-cut home run that's likely, but it's, do you minimize the risk? Do you go into the season and just wait till the trade deadline? Like I said also, I think a lot of it depends on just the domino effect. I think that's one of the things us fans don't fully talk about in terms of what happens around the league. It's not just what the Knicks want to do. We got to wait to see what happens around this league, because there could be a Woj bomb away from everyone's world changing. I mentioned the Clippers with Paul George, with Kawhi. Maybe there's a big falling out. We talked about the Clippers not wanting to blow anything up. Maybe it's on the player side of things. Disgruntled players happen all the time. Bradley Beal might finally say, "Get me up out of here." Damian Lillard, which may not be a Knicks situation, but he might say, "Get me out of here." And then there's a kind of a three-way trade. Maybe a Kawhi Leonard or Paul George situation changes. But if I'm to sort of answer the question that John did in terms of how likely, I think the Knicks do make a bigger move out of Randle, Barrett, Mitch, and quickly. I think they're going to strike while the iron is hot with the CBA and the salaries going up. And I think a large part of it has to do with teams that want to move out from one of these stars. Karl Anthony Towns, the thing in Minnesota is going to be huge, something to watch. The Sixers, people talking about Joel Embiid. I know Dirty Dancer's on board on that train, going all in for Joel. Who else? Like the Bulls, like we talked about with John. Their situation is really, really unique. They barely made the play-in. Got a huge payroll. We know how the Chicago Bulls can get cheap. Lonzo's health. I just think that front office is just done with whatever core they have. I think, Caruso could be had. But if the Knicks don't make that big move, I could see them definitely getting into the draft. For that question tonight, I think the Knicks will get into the draft. They'll try and target some shooters. They'll definitely get dudes coming in working out. And if they do end up falling in love with somebody who may have connections, coming up the ranks, and that they might like his moxie, like they did with Grimes, like Worldwide Wes did with Quickly. I think the New York Knicks have got a lot of ties, a lot of connections with Scott Perry and Gerson Rosas, Wes. I guess that is one of the advantages of the Knicks having a huge front office, 6 degrees of separation with Kevin Bacon. We got like a front office of 8 people. Someone's bound to know someone that knows someone coming up. But we got, of course, the granddaddy of them all, Walt Perrin, who's all over the place. Came down to Australia to watch the NBL. He's scouting in Europe. He's all over the place. The Knicks have a full-time scout in Europe also. Gerson Rosas could be a guy that they feel is ready, to come back or to come on board now and be that backup point guard. But yeah, man, I feel like the Knicks will be super active. The Portland Trailblazers are another team where I'll bet my house on some changes. I mean, you don't need to be a smart betting man to realize that Portland's going to do something. They have the third pick now. They have Damian Lillard, Jeremy Grant's a free agent. So connect the dots, from these teams that are going to do something. For all you Brooklyn Nets, watch with the Mikal Bridges. Watch. I don't think they're gonna avoid temptation in this summer. I think they're gonna keep him, use him as a centerpiece to build around. But maybe Cam Johnson, Seth Curry, Patty Mills, maybe some of those, role players are available out in Brooklyn. Dante DiVincenzo, I like him as the mid-level. He's a nice target. I don't know if Brook Lopez can be had. I know he's old, but Brook Lopez would open up the paint so much for Brunson and RJ and even Randle to do work also. And what does that mean for Mitch? So Brook Lopez is probably a pipe dream. Something that ain't a pipe dream is KP. KP can opt out of the player option, 33 mil, to sign a longer term deal, which I think he will. He'll want that guaranteed dosh, that guaranteed money to, in case of injury. So I think KP is going to be available. He's going to be had. I think Kuzma, reports are Kuzma might want to get out of Washington, go to a bigger market. That's going to be interesting to see. But in terms of the minor moves, I think Obi Toppin is probably a guy that's going to be talked about a lot in conversations. Corey Kispert, Chris Duarte, role players that can shoot are definitely needed on this team. I think I asked John this, but I have got concerns over the fit with Hart, Deuce McBride, Barrett, just so many wings that are undersized that can't shoot. So if the Knicks do just bring in one role player, it has to be a guy that is above level shooting, and hopefully a solid defender also. The Golden State Warriors, another team to watch. What do they do with Wiggins? Do they need to cut payroll? Jordan Poole doesn't really excite me so much. But yeah, let's continue the conversation. I like the Jeremy Grant move. I know John didn't seem too high on it. I think you lose offense moving on from Randle, but I think to get solid two-way play can open up the door for RJ to get more touches. Jalen Brunson to operate a bit more space. Jeremy Grant, I think he's just a better fit. And it may not be a move that adds 5 more wins, but in the playoffs, it might just be a better fit. What are you guys thinking right now? I appreciate all your questions and buzz. If there isn't anything, if there's something we didn't hit on, just pop it in the chat again. Salute JJ. Thoughts on Nas Reed? He's a bucket that can play the 5 or 4. Yeah, I like Nas as well. Great fit. These are the kind of moves that I think the Knicks will entertain, definitely. Because we know the hardest move is to move a Randle, move a Barrett, move a Mitch. I think Leon Rose might just bet on, incremental improvements, man, for one more year. If something's not to his liking. And I asked John the question, I want to ask you guys, how much do you think Tom Thibodeau is going to be, having an input, a say in players we get? That's the first kind of thoughts I heard from John about Tibbs not wanting Karl Anthony Towns. I did hear a report, unconfirmed, that Tibbs might be open to reuniting with Karl Anthony Towns. So, I mean, it's hard to know what to believe, but I guess if Tibbs has had that exposure with Cat, we definitely would know that him and Leon are in sync. I'm 100% with JJ on this one, man. Yep. Yeah, we need to look at the center spot, the 3, 4, or 5 spot to bring in some more shooting. And I'm more than likely looking at the 4 and the 5 if I have to narrow it down, man. I'm really high on Brunson and RJ Barrett's ability to get to the cup. And if we can have a stretch 4 or a stretch 5, that's going to open up the door for RJ to get bigger reps now. It's all about those reps now, fam. Because, he was able to get to the cup in the playoffs. That's big. Also, we know Jalen Brunson lives in the paint also. Yeah, Brook's still an incredible defender as well. But yeah, Milwaukee's window is wide open. It would take a huge move for the Bucks to get out from him. Dirty's thoughts on KP. If you can rent for a year for maybe Washington's protected pick, it could be worth it. But no real assets back. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think I would lean towards Washington, trying to keep KP, but they've got to try to also pay Kuzma, possibly, too, which is interesting. H Money salute OG Anunoby. Yeah, I like that move also. It would just depend on, how much we're giving up as well, fam. They might ask for an RJ Barrett, return home to Canada in that deal. I'm high on any guy that's a two-way player, basically. They need to be able to defend and they need to be able to shoot, and we're nice. We can't bring in more one-dimensional guys. That's what concerns me with John's thing with LaVine. I love LaVine, the offensive player, but LaVine, the defensive player, next to Brunson, he's got big question marks, defensively. Yeah, Naz Reid, Jaden McDaniels. Yeah, look out for Minnesota in terms of trade partner. I've not heard anything, but just watch closely. I'll tell you why. We've got Tom Thibodeau, formerly in that organization. We've got Gerson Rosas, formerly the president of basketball ops with that organization. These two organizations have got a lot of connections in terms of Minnesota now and the New York Knicks. So look out for that, man. That's why I know I asked John what's the most likely thing, and I know this ain't people's favorite situation, but I could see Karl Anthony Towns still being the number one most likely big target. Not necessarily the target they want the most, but the most likely available. And if it's out of Ayton or it's Cat, I would still probably prefer Cat. That's saying a lot about Ayton. What's good, Darren? I've got a question. What should the Knicks do with Trevor Keels by any chance? Trevor Keels was a missed draft opportunity, I think 42nd pick. Hasn't worked out yet. To be honest, I would not worry about his roster spot at this point. I would either trade him as salary filler or cut him at this point. He just doesn't have enough size for me. The scoring and the size ain't there. I really do feel like the Knicks need to look at the backup point guard spot also. Unfortunately, it's a shame what happened with D Rose. I expect the Knicks to trade D Rose in terms of that, or his salary is expiring, so it may be a sign and trade for salary purposes, or D Rose just decides to skip up or take the veteran minimum and stay with the Knicks as a mentor. But in terms of that, Evan Fournier's got one more year. He said that he's most likely feeling he's going to get traded, and I feel like that too. I think Evan Fournier's most likely outgoing. We need that 15 mil, 18 mil salary outgoing. And it looks like the Boston Celtics about to force a game 6 on their home floor, which is to be expected. So a mirror image of the New York Knicks Heat series now. It heads to game 6 in Miami. If the Boston Celtics show up, man, if this goes 7, you guys give me your thoughts. Could you see this Heat Celtics thing going 7 now? Yep, this is another good point. Another reason why I'm not that high on LaVine, because RJ Barrett's contract, his ability to defend better than LaVine, with offensive upside, and yet John's right. His offense may never reach the ceiling of a Zach LaVine, but I'd rather just keep RJ for now as well. Try to bring in another longer defensive wing like OG, Pascal Siakam. What do you guys think of a Keldon Johnson fit? Keldon Johnson's another name to watch out for in San Antonio. He cooked us this year, man. Keldon Johnson with a bunch of G Leaguers cooked the Knicks this season. Now, DeMar DeRozan, I could entertain that. I like his mid-range shooting. I think that's underrated. Brunson and DeRozan's ability to open up the space, to hit the mid-range is key. It can't just be three-pointers and layups. I think, we know DeMar is a big clutch shot maker also. So, again, it depends on what you're giving up for DeMar. He's got that pedigree, although he ain't great in the playoffs. But mid-level guys, Dante DiVincenzo. I would look at a Seth Curry. If you can get him cheaper for one of those other exceptions, I think it's the $6 million exception. Maybe you could get a Seth Curry in here. I think the Duarte thing makes a lot of sense. Also, like Mustafa hits on as well. Duarte is a good fit. He can ball handle some. He's a good two-guard swing man, and Knicks should do what they can to get him. I think that's a move that could benefit both sides, man. We need that shooting, bit of upside. Darren doesn't mind a bit of KJ also. San Antonio is going to be fascinating because they got obviously the big fish, Vic Wemby, and we've got to see how that plays out with Pop. How fast do they want to accelerate that? Keldon's a big part of that. The Spurs aren't dumb enough. That's the issue. The thing is, a lot of these dudes that are very gettable are kind of like leftovers, and the dudes that we really want, like Mikal Bridges, Brandon Ingram, those kind of guys may not be available. The way people talk about Jeremy Grant, people talking about like that's a mulligan. Maybe the Blazers can get a better deal. Maybe the Blazers hang tough, see what they can get. Maybe they trade Anthony Simons and the third pick. They bring in a number 2 with Dame, and they keep Jeremy Grant. So that's interesting. But if I'm to guess 3 teams that are most likely to blow things up or make significant changes, would be the Bulls, Minnesota, and I'm probably going to say Toronto. And probably maybe a 4th close behind is Washington, just with all the pieces they have. But Pascal Siakam, Gary Trent Jr. is a free agent. Masai Ujiri ain't happy with the way the Raptors finished. That season ended badly. Fred VanVleet's getting older, and OG Anunoby, Gary Trent, Pascal. A question I always ask, how much does Tibbs have input? Best believe Tibbs is a OG Anunoby fan. Tom Thibodeau loves some OG Anunoby, so look out for that. Look out for those talks to possibly happen. What are you guys' thoughts on OG? Great catch and shoot. Got the size, the versatility to play the 3 and the 4. Or would you prefer a Pascal? If you had to make a decision on one, who are you higher on for the Knicks, Pascal or OG? 100%. There's mutual interest, fam, Darren, on Duarte and the Knicks. The Knicks obviously have connections. They've got a big Dominican community also. So I think, Duarte did want to come to the Knicks, as well. And I think the Knicks were interested at one point. I think that's a move worth worth exploring also. But yeah, in terms of wing shooters, we talked about Josh Hart. There's reports today, I think that talks could get up to 18 milli. Now we know the cap's going up, but what are your thoughts on paying Josh Hart 18 milli? um, I'm not about to get stingy because Hart's was very, very, very valuable for us. But man, 18 milli is a lot for a guy that doesn't shoot too well. But I guess just these are the times, it is what it is. We traded for him. It's kind of like a done deal now. It's basically a marriage that's consummated. Um, I can't really see talks breaking apart unless the Knicks lowball him. Yeah, OG would have to agree to an extension for Dirty to consider any trade with that. Also with Jeremy Grant, or I think Jeremy Grant can sign. Is Jeremy Grant restricted or unrestricted? I think he's unrestricted. So I think we could just sign Jeremy Grant. But I think with salary purposes, we would need, um, although maybe he would fit with Fournier and D Rose's salary. Um, Dirty says 17 milli, 18 is too much for Hart. Yep. You know what they say? You start high and you negotiate down. Maybe I would be high on giving Hart a player option. If we are giving him a 3 or 4 year deal, try to give him a player option so that he opts out, or a team option ideally, but maybe a player option. And when the cap goes up, he hopes that he can opt out again and get one more big payday. What's good, Bricks? Obi with 2 second rounders for Duarte. Yeah, and also let's try to get the 26th pick. So you guys that don't know yet, we'll talk about the draft a lot more. I know we didn't get to hit on it too much, but guess what? The Knicks don't have a draft pick yet. But with that said, I think the Knicks will try to get pick 26 or 29 from Indy. So, look at Indy's squad. They got so much young players and talent. I don't know if they can make the selections at 29 and 26. And if the Knicks come swooping in with an Obi Toppin kind of deal, that could be a sweet deal for them. See what Obi's got for one more year in his rookie deal. Yeah, you know what? Who are we bidding against? You know how the Knicks operate, Dirty. They operate with that family pact where we look after our own. I think they're going to look after Josh Hart, but I think there will be some teams try to, you know, inquire about the availability. But I just don't think Hart's going to want to go nowhere. We did hear Mark Berman tell us that there's a slight possibility that Hart gives the Knicks a discount, but I'll believe it when I see it. Ain't no one looking to give discounts at this point, with the world the way it is, especially living in New York City. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe they can work out something where the salary is, the salary is descending. They can pay him a lot more upfront, incentives, all of that stuff, perhaps. What's good, AP? Yeah, Josh Hart earned the contract. He played well. Unfortunate the playoffs. I think he was just miscast and put in a different kind of role. But I think regular season Josh Hart is going to be extremely valuable for this organization for next season. I'm looking forward to seeing more Josh Hart, big moments. He can hit the big shot, which was frustrating that he didn't end up getting the ball from Jalen Brunson in that last moment. We don't know. Maybe Josh Hart would have sank that 3 ball just like he did in game 1 against Cleveland. But we know the shooting ain't there. But the defense, the rebounding is crazy. Yep, you've made that point also. Tibbs was, hawkeyeing the talent at the combine. He likes to see who's got that moxie. And he spotted Quentin Grimes last combine also. So yeah, the Knicks will get busy. I think we know. I think they could be planning a bigger overhaul than we think. Let's say if they do move on from Obi or quickly, for a veteran, they're going to want another young talent on a rookie scale deal as well, you know. And also bringing in Hart, another veteran, creates an even bigger imbalance, especially with the Keels issue as well. Look out for the undrafted free agents. Look out for the second round picks. Look out for Rocas. There's a lot of different options. I do hope we can keep a Deuce McBride. I feel like another year or two of more development, he can become a real piece, a real player in this league. I just love his defense. It's very, very useful. You know, the shooting ain't there, but I know we didn't use Deuce to the best of the abilities. But yeah, the 4 and the 5 is big for me, stretching the floor out for Barrett and for Brunson. Let's see what we can do. Quentin Grimes is basically the closest to being untouchable, so that lets you know he's probably the starting 2. If they do move on from Barrett, it's probably going to be for an OG or a Zach LaVine in that kind of deal. If they move on from Randle, it's either for another stretch 4, a scoring 4, or a wing. Also, I think Mitchell Robinson's probably the least likely to get traded at this point, just because of his cheap contract, and we know what he brings: rebounding, beastly rebounding and putbacks, and defense. Also, as we get ready to wrap this thing up, been a great show talking to John SCHMEELK and the chat buzzing throughout this off season. And guess what, man? More content coming tomorrow night. We will be live again Friday night, Knicks Buzz, 5 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow night, with a surprise guest. Right? I would love to say who it is right now, but I'm not going to. It's going to be a surprise guest, someone who hasn't been on the show before. 5 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. They cover the NBA nationally, so it's going to be fun. Another conversation tomorrow night. Keep the buzz coming. Come at us with any questions. But yeah, a lot happening in the Knicks verse, and I think we're going to be very, very, very busy coming up, improving this squad. And let's see what happens, man. If the Celtics can force a Game 7, it's going to be interesting. I do still feel like the Celtics are the better team. They're really, really underperformed. But, you know, credit to the Heat for what they've done, what they've been able to do. And I will continue to talk about it as our Game 5 is in the books. Boston Celtics about to take care of business at home, up by 19 as well. I've got to peep the box score and see what happens. Yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, hit us in the comment section as well, and we'll see you again tomorrow night. Peace.